afternoon session is correcting and remediating reading comprehension skills deficit. All right. Um, uh, just this Wednesday, I talked about I described who struggling learners are, and I presented a particular framework, how we can categorize and how we can help our struggling learners, struggling readers, and be able to help them cope with these deficits. And we use the framework of uh, the three patterns of identifying different groups of difficulties of students. We have the specific reading word difficulties, we have a specific reading comprehension skills difficulties, and we have at the middle of that, we have the mixed reading difficulties. Okay, so right now today I'll be presenting a new framework, a different way to look at how we can help our students. So what I'm trying to do with this is that every time I present a topic, I present new frameworks and new models and new approaches that we can use, because I do not believe that there is one approach or framework or model that can satisfy and address all the problems of our students as far as reading comprehension is concerned. What I want to do is to beef your knowledge about all of these frameworks, and I will allow you to choose from this plethora of models and approaches, so that you get to have a way of adjusting to the different needs of your learners and different specific deficits of your students. So what we want to achieve with this topic is to help our learners become readers, because as I've been explaining since day 1 of July of my webinars with Vibal group, it would take a lot of literacy skills from our students to be able to hurdle the responsibilities and tasks, to be able to cope with the demands of distance education, being that the core of distance education in the Philippines, as per mandated, as per ordered by Department of Education, would be modular. And on that note, since it's modular, be it online, be it printed, it will require our students to read all of this. And if our students have problems with vocabulary, with decoding, and now comprehension, definitely our students will be a loss in learning from the content areas and learning from the lessons that we have prepared for them. And it becomes more of a frustrating situation, not just for learners, but also a frustrating situation for all our teachers to have, one way or the other, have put out a lot of effort to finish and make sure that the modules and the distance education learning materials are at par with, quote unquote, the needs of the learners out there learning at home. And so this afternoon we're going to discuss some of those points, how we can overcome such problems that we can see, we can see now. So as we go through our discussion, I will again bust some common myths and misconceptions about teaching students comprehension and remediating comprehension skills among our students. And we'll proceed to discussion. I identified 4 questions that we are going to answer so that we will be able to help our students with comprehension deficits. The first question would be, what is language comprehension? I would like us to understand that language comprehension per se has a huge interplay and influence on how students will be able to understand what they are reading, no matter what reading material they are reading, be it for science, mathematics, or for the language subjects. So we need to understand that. Then number 2 would be, what are essential reading comprehension skills? We need to identify which of those reading comprehension skills specifically where our students may have struggled so much, and by identifying where the point where it causes breakdown of comprehension among our students, then we will be able to identify ways how we can help our students cope with this breakdowns. Now, the problem there is that it will require our teachers to do a lot of testing and feedbacking to our students, and that we're going to discuss later on. And then next would be third question: what causes reading comprehension difficulties? We need to see, are these situations that we are identifying as probable causes or possible causes of reading difficulties present environment and situation at home? And if it's present there at home, did we create a checklist for us to be able to identify that are these problems existing in our homes, and thereby giving us an idea that our students may possibly encounter a lot of problems along the way as they go through the modular distance education mode of learning. And then the last question would be, how do we correct and remediate reading comprehension deficits? I will give you frameworks, specific frameworks, not necessarily strategies, but more of a framework, how you can adjust to it. And then I can now just refer you back to some of the webinars and topics that I have specifically talked about, strategies and techniques and home practical ways how we can help our students overcome such identified deficit. And then we'll have our open foruming, and then we'll provide you, and I'll provide you with some conclusions and implications and challenges for you to take on as part of your takeaways from my session this afternoon. Let's begin. So let's now have our introduction, and mostly identifying myths about reading comprehension. So these are some of the common myths, all right, about reading comprehension. Number one, learning to read is a natural process. No, it is not as natural as breathing. It is not as natural as your muscles growing as you go through your physical development from birth to infancyhood, to toddlerhood, to early childhood, to late childhood, to, no, it doesn't work that way. Like any other skill, reading should be seen as a skill, and like any other skills, they need to be explicitly taught, explicitly practiced until such time that our students are able to incorporate these skills into their own schema or their own mental processing, and thereby become skilled at that. All right. So we do not hope that our students, by listening to the teacher or attending classes every day, online or modular, they will eventually be able to find ways to learn to teach themselves how to read. No, it is taught explicitly. Next, common myths about reading comprehension. Weekly vocabulary lists are effective. A lot of practices of teachers out there would be, to incorporate, 5 words a day or 5 words a week. But comment that I've been hearing a lot from teachers would be 5 words a day. Now, a lot of research shows that it's good for vocabulary development, but since vocabulary development and eventually for comprehension, if the 5 words that you are introducing to our students are the key words that will be used in the comprehension of any lesson that they're going to take part that day. But if these words are isolated words and they do not make sense, does not lend helping students understand the lessons that day or for that week, then the vocabulary that you are giving to your students are nothing and will be forgotten by your students. These are some of the practices of students learning English as a foreign language, that they keep on memorizing words, eventually hoping that they will memorize these words, and then when they are conversing with other people, they will be able to recall the words and help them, be articulate. But it doesn't work that way. We need to situate learning of vocabulary in the context of what they are learning. Okay. So it is not, the effectiveness of vocabulary list learning depends on how you situate it in the context of the lesson. Next would be readers who are behind should master literal comprehension before inferential comprehension. It doesn't follow that way. Although in the instructional design, the way we're going to organize our materials should be from easy to difficult, or in a way that our students will be able to understand by presenting easy information first to going towards more difficult information. Like in the curriculum, it was designed in such a way that we provide our students with easy skills, the basic skills, moving towards higher forms of skills that are compounded based on the base skills that they have learned in the early grades. But for the readers, students who are struggling, it is very important for us to tap first their emotions. So we will start with not literal, but basically applied, like asking questions like, what did you understand about the selection? Did you like it? Why did you like it? So we start with what they feel, because what we want to do with struggling readers is to boost their self-confidence and self-esteem. Because as we explained in my previous webinars, that our students who are struggling, it is not just because of they lack the skills. It is because of lack of confidence of what they can do. And because they have not acquired yet those skills, all the more that they see themselves as are not capable of doing and applying that kind of skill. So we need to start where they are by emotionally helping them connect with the lesson and be able to focus on the acquisition and learning of the skill. Next would be number 4. Questions to aid comprehension must come from the teacher or the textbooks. We have been going through education that most questions to aid comprehension should always come from the teacher, the guide questions, and questions would come from the textbooks. Eventually, if you realize that when you are reading on your own, studying on your own, there are no questions. The teacher is not present, and especially right now that we are doing distance education, the teacher won't be present during the time that the students are doing their independent study and independent learning, and thereby having the idea that our students will no longer ask questions for themselves because the teacher is no longer present there. Or the textbook say some of the questions that they are thinking about are not in the textbook, hence they're just going to set aside their own personal questions. No, what we want our students to realize is that the questions that aid comprehension primarily emanates from the individual readers, because my comprehension, the way I will comprehend, my rate of comprehension, my speed of comprehension would be different from the other students. Therefore, on that note, I will have different sets of questions to help me monitor my own questions. The teachers asking questions to students is helping students formulate those questions on their own, so that later on, students get to realize that this is what the teacher is doing, or what the book is asking them to do, is so that they will be able to formulate their own questions, actively engage their minds in the activity, in the reading activity. Because reading is an active process. It requires a lot of thinking from the students, and a lot of students who are keep on asking themselves while they're reading are actually in the process of comprehending, and it's one of the many indicators of a good reader. Okay. Number 5 myth would be real comprehension is a matter of finding the author's exact meaning. That is a myth, because since the author is not present, we will not be able to get exactly the meaning, or the meaning that the author wants us to get. What we can do is at least find proof that our comprehension or understanding of a particular lesson or selection is somewhat correct, because of the proof, or because of the examples that you provide, or the teacher provides, or the book provides, to help us, understand that how we understood it is actually what it should be. But saying that's 100% exact meaning from the author, that cannot be, unless you are the author of the book. But on the basis where the author, the ones who read and study their own book, there are instances where even if they wrote the book, when they start reading it, it feels like they have a different understanding of different understanding of how they are reading the book that they wrote. Ganun po ang sitwasyon na yan. And finally, the 6th common myths about reading comprehension is that good readers do not need guidance in effective reading and studying. No. Even if our students are good readers, it does not connote automatically that they have good study habits or good sets of learning strategies. So even if they are good readers, there are a lot of students out there who are good readers. They have, because of family intervention, tutors, and probably because of the teachers themselves aiding the students to become good readers. But the point there is that attacking a lot of materials would require learning styles and learning strategies, and we need to equip our students with that. So that means even if our students are already good readers, say they're already in high school, that doesn't mean that we're going to leave them on their own. We still have to provide them with certain guidance. It could be through graphical presentations or certain guide questions that they need to follow, or an open-ended activity that they can accomplish and finish either while they're accomplishing the reading task or after the reading task. It's up to you. The point there is that even if they're good readers, do not leave them on their own, because we still need to provide them with other higher forms of skills like learning techniques, learning strategies, and study habits. All right. With that being said, let's now begin our discussion. So let's now understand the nature of reading comprehension so that we will be able to correct it. Now, I'll be presenting to you this. First question. What is language comprehension? Let me graphically present to you my answer to this question. All right. So let's say a beginning reader trying to read and study a book from science. Let's say a grade 2 student or grade 3 students, because in the K-12 curriculum, our students from preschool up to grade 3 would be beginning reading, would be focusing on beginning reading program or curricula in Filipino, English, and mother tongue and across subject areas for grade 1, 2, 3. All right. So this is a student on in the primary level, and this is her thought. Ano kaya ang iniisip ng aming teacher? Di pa nga ako nakakabasa ng maigi sa mother tongue. Pinapabasa na ako agad sa Filipino at English. Language comprehension means, have we exposed our students to the language of what they're supposed to be reading on? Since our students are progressively in the Philippines, we're using multilingual, mother tongue multilingual education framework, that our students are learning many languages from one language to another through a transition design. The point there is that, have we identified whether our students have reached a certain proficiency level, literacy level of one language, and it's easy for them to transfer the skills to the other language. So sa ganitong sitwasyon po, kunwari ang alam pa lang ng bata ay nasa mother tongue pa lang siya. And then pumasok ang Filipino at saka English, di ba? And then pinabasa, meron siyang materialis agad sa Filipino na at sa English babasa. Sabi dito, reading materials in Filipino and English. So, ang kanyang utak po ay nasa mother tongue. Okay, nasa utak, ang language of thought. The language of thought of the child is in mother tongue. Ang tingin niya sa mga words sa Filipino at sa English reading materials ay ganyan. It doesn't make sense. And then automatically teachers would say, especially in grade 2 and grade 3, non-readers sa mga estudyante namin sa Filipino at sa English. Definitely, because you have not yet taught the child or your students to decode in that language. Therefore, comprehension will not take place unless there are pictures. Unless there are pictures, unless there are audio materials to support that. The point is, ano bang tinuturo natin? Listening, viewing, o kaya reading? Now, if that's reading, then before we require our students to be able to comprehend the meaning or get meaning from what they're reading in English and Filipino. We need to understand, have they acquired a certain level of proficiency in the oral language of the material. If it's English, tingnan natin. Meron na bang level of oral proficiency ang bata sa English na it's easy for them to transition from oral to written? Hindi, nandun pa lang siya sa mother tongue eh. Pinilit agad magkaroon ng Filipino. Tapos ipapasok ang English. Sir, meron naman pong one quarter gap. We're talking about 2 months. Do you think 2 months would be enough for students to have an oral language proficiency? It takes years, people. Tayo nga namang adults na, we're still until now struggling to be proficient in the English language. Ako po na Bisaya, I'm still learning to be proficient in Filipino. And yet, we expect so much of our early grade learners and readers to be so proficient. That's too much. So what happens then? Comprehension is out of the picture. Nawala na siya. So what do we do now? So it is very important for us in language comprehension that whatever language that we want our students to be able to read in whatever reading material for that matter, that would be for English or Filipino or for any science and mathematics, we provide our students ample opportunity to acquire proficient level in the oral language first and foremost. Now, when I say oral language, we're talking about exposure to listening to the language and speaking the language. A lot of research, especially on oracy, showed great potential for students who have been exposed, have thorough exposure, various opportunities to be exposed to use the language for reading, in listening, and speaking. If we have provided our students with sufficient enough exposure for them to acquire a certain proficiency level of the use of the oral language, listening and speaking, it will be easy for them and for the teacher to transition those skills into print. So that will be transitioning oral codes to print codes. Okay? So yun lang po ang explanation ko po dyan. Okay, naulit lang po yung slide. Alright? So that's how we see language comprehension. So let me now answer in words the importance of language comprehension to reading comprehension. To read and understand text, a child needs to be able to understand the language. Before expecting a child to be able to read and understand a story, the question should be asked, could the child understand this story if it was read to her, him? Ibig sabihin, baka hindi pa maintindihan ng bata, hindi pa niya kayang magbasa na mag-isa sa print. Baka may kailangan pa siyang transition na mas kaya niya pag may naririnig siya na ibang taong binabasin at sumusunod siya kasi hindi pa siya fluent reader. Now, I know there are a lot of teachers out there that you know this already. Please do not bash me because there were comments saying, Sir, alam na namin po pinagsasabihin nyo, you're wasting our time. I'm okay with that. So kung alam nyo na po, don't deprive other viewers who are willing to listen to this information. Hindi ko po sinasabi na hindi nyo alam to. What I'm trying to say is that this is important for us to understand because the basic comprehension is that they know the language. But remember, what's happening out there is that we have been teaching our students language, but not teaching them the language because it will facilitate comprehension and literacy development. Nakalimutan kasi ang literacy eh. Importante lang ay magaling ang bata mag-Ingles, magaling ang bata mag-Filipino, magaling matatas. But then again, we've forgotten to transition their language skills towards literacy development and enhancement. Nawala na yung transition na yun. Right? So that's what I would like to focus on. Language comprehension, perhaps, why our students are not comprehending what they're reading. Because one, they have no comprehension of the language of the text or of the print. Okay? Thank you very much, Lipo Kugalet. So those who already know this information that I'm providing, please let that serve as a confirmation and affirmation that you know all of this, and then share it to others. Don't use that as something that you can use as to think that you're better than the other teachers. We're all teachers here, and then we are coming from different walks of life, and we have been trained differently. So we don't share the same knowledge. But I would always start with my mantra from my mentor, Dr. Tatlong-Hari, that knowledge, if not shared, it is nothing. And another mantra given to me by our spiritual director, saying that knowledge should make us humble. It should not make us proud of what we can do. It makes us humble because the more we know, the more we get to realize that we know less. Okay, so let's now have the second question. So we are now able to see the relationship of language comprehension to reading comprehension. And now let's understand the second question. What are the essential reading comprehension skills? All right. So now I will share to you the model or the framework designed by Sebastian Wren, which I've been using thoroughly ever since, as also one of my frameworks when I did my special paper for reading on vocabulary and special and technical vocabulary framework, which I will present to you later on. I will share to you the framework that I designed in 2005. This model or framework is called the Cognitive Foundations of Reading, of Learning to Read. So, to achieve reading comprehension according to this model, all right, it goes through foundation of many skills. So, ibig sabihin po, kung ang bata hindi makaintindi, hindi agad non-reader ang bata. Maraming pinapanggalingan o maraming pang skills na maaring i-identify muna natin kung saan nagkaroon ng breakdown. So, we will now divide into two facets or two sides ang mga skills ng reading comprehension or skills that contribute to the ease of reading comprehension or the ease of students comprehending any reading material for that matter. So we have on the other side the language comprehension skills and the decoding skills. So itong dalawang big group of skills, all right, lend to. Isa lang daw dito sa dalawa ang mawala, reading comprehension will break down. All right? Kung bata hindi marunong mag-decode but may language comprehension, ito sinasabi po natin, just because a child is good in English does not mean that the child could be a good reader. Kaya nga po, that's a fallacy na sinabi ko sa inyo last time on language learning that native speakers, because they are native speakers of English, does not make them good readers. In like manner, yung mga Filipino po, mga native speakers po ng Tagalog, does not make them automatically good readers in Filipino or in Tagalog print. No, it cannot be. So, kailangan pa silang turuan ng decoding skills. Kahit may language comprehension sila, kung wala silang decoding skills, comprehension will still back down. Or the other way around. Even if students have been taught thoroughly, explicitly decoding skills, and yet they don't have language comprehension in a sense that they lack the use of this language in different contexts and different situations, still comprehension will back down. So these two groups of skills work together to help our students be able to comprehend the materials that they're supposed to understand. And therefore, on that note, when we develop our distance learning, distance education materials for our students for distance learning, we need to consider is the language and its context and the examples for which the language is being used are familiar and relevant to the experience of our students. Baka hindi sila makarelate sa language at saka situations na binibigay natin sa mga bata. Kahit decoder sila, hindi naman nila interest ang ginamit natin. Alright? So titingnan po natin din yun. So let's now just zone in on language comprehension. What are those essential skills for our students to be able to acquire or be a language comprehender to facilitate reading comprehension? We have two skills. And the first skill we need to help our students with, which basically would begin at home from a research showed that language comprehension happens even inside the womb of the mother. Therefore, ganun katagal na po ang background knowledge. So dapat daw nagsisimula yan sa bahay. In fact, nagsisimula sa nanay nang nasa loob pa lang ang mga bata sa kanila. Ang tawag daw po natin doon ay background knowledge. Alright? Okay? So that means this is how our students being exposed to the use of the language of the community. Kung mother tongue yan, hindi mother tongue kanyang exposure sa language, kaya madali po niyang maintindihan, makipag-converse in the mother tongue. Ngayon, kung ang bata ay pinapabasa po now natin, if we want our students to be able to read in Filipino, especially for those who are non-Tagalog speakers, then we have to provide them with background knowledge on how to use the language Tagalog or Filipino for them to be able to read in Filipino. In like manner, it's the same. We need to provide them with simulations, situations, ample experiences of the use of the language English for them to have a language comprehension of the language English so that it will facilitate eventually to help them read in English. All right. The second skill for language comprehension we need to help our students understand is the linguistic knowledge. They must understand. So linguistic knowledge can be divided into three. Okay, we have the phonology. They need to understand the sound system, how these sounds work, not just in isolation, not just in the meaningful unit like the phonemes. We should also contextualize that in word level, because sounds, if it's not taught in a meaningful context, hindi yan magkakaroon ng comprehension. What we want is meaning kaya comprehension So sounds in isolation is not a good instruction, explicit instruction for our students. We teach them these sounds for them in the context of a word with a particular meaning, all right? Or what we call as patterns of words. Later on, I will show to you the framework on how to teach sounds with the context of vocabulary or in the context of lexical development or vocabulary development. Another one will be syntax. Students get to know that certain words function something in a sentence as a subject and so on and so forth. So tinuturo natin yan. So ibig sabihin, hindi pa rin tinuturo lang natin sa batang grammar just for the sake of for them to learn the language. No, we are teaching them grammar so that it will facilitate comprehension. All right. Let me give you an example, say in oral emphasis. Say the statement is, tingnan natin kung magbabago po ang meaning sa syntax, kung mag-iba po ang aking semantics, ang focus ng semantics ko. Like, Maria went to the market. Okay, yan po ang ating syntax. The phonology, we can just focus on Maria, starting the content words, Maria went to the market. Okay, then semantics po natin. Semantic 1. Maria went to the market. Semantics 2. Maria went to the market. Semantics 3. Maria went to the market. May pagbabago ba ng meaning ng semantics ko on the way I orally delivered the sentences? Yes, because the first sentence semantically I delivered as Maria went to the market. And now I'm now asking my listeners to focus on who went to the market. But my second semantics would be Maria went to the market. And now I'm now making my listeners focus on what she did. All right, or in the action. And then on my second semantics would be Maria went to the market. Now I'm asking my students where did Maria go? Okay, or where did Maria go? The point here is that as teachers, we need to help our students understand that it is not just basically sentence construction, but it's also on the meaning, how we would like to express our meaning through sentences. That's why one concept or one meaning in our heads can be expressed in expressed in so many ways or so many sentences, right? Or a meaning can be expressed in many words. Now let's proceed to the other side of the reading comprehension, which is decoding, can be divided into two, the cipher knowledge and the lexical knowledge, all right? The cipher knowledge, for our students to be able to acquire cipher knowledge, they need to know phonemic awareness or phoneme awareness. That if there's the meaningful unit of sound in a word would carries with it the meaning, and if it's changed, will change meaning. A good example would be boy. Boy is different from toy. Boy and toy is different from koi. So, importante para marunong si estudyante makinig. Kaya nga dapat oral nga exposure to the child. It would be easier for them to read if they're orally exposed to it. Kaya lang po si teacher po dapat marunong mag-enunciate. It requires a good enunciation skills from our teachers, all right? Well, of course, examples and pictures too. I will not go into detail on that because we already had a session on teaching beginning reading. So I would like you to review the webinars, the previous webinars in Vibal on teaching reading, teaching beginning reading, teaching vocabulary. In fact, in this week we had correcting, remediating vocabulary. So I don't want to give you so much detail on that because there's a separate webinar on that. So I would like you to visit that webinar so that you would know more about lexical knowledge later on. Okay, so next we have, for our students to be able to continue on acquiring cipher knowledge and at the same time lexical knowledge, we need our students' knowledge of alphabet principle. All right, the principle is that there's a rule or there are certain systems of how sounds are stringed together, how these sounds are stringed together to form a word, and how these words are stringed together to form phrases, sentences, and so on and so forth. All right, and functions of vocabulary too. Okay, That sometimes, even if they are considered as nouns, they can also function as adjectives. They can function as verbs later on. So mahirap po kung ang pagkakaturo daw natin ng mga words are just categorized as nouns, verbs. No, words can function as nouns, verbs. Halimbawa, love can function as a noun, but it can function also as a verb. And later on, it can also function as an adjective or a modifier. So kung ang pagkakaturo lang natin itong words na to, pilaster lang natin na nouns, hindi. Mabubuo din yan. Kaya may mga bata na bakit yung love ginawang verb dito? Hindi naman siya dapat verb kasi noun siya, because nga pagkakaturo ay words have been specifically categorized into those types of words or categories of words. We should not do that. It does not facilitate comprehension. Next would be, of course, letter knowledge. The sound system, of course, we need to teach our students. So, magkapareho po sila halos ng phonology, only that the letter knowledge here is that our students do know that a sound can be represented by a letter, all right? So, especially for Filipino, although Filipino, sinasabi kung anong pagkakasulat siya, bye-bye, hindi kung siya anong bye-bye, siya pagkakabigtas, hindi naman lahat ng salita sa Filipino. Tapos sa English po, meron tayong mga sinasabi na mga silent sounds and so on and so forth. And we need to teach our students those R-controlled, L-controlled sounds or words. So we need to teach our students that. And that's why the curriculum is very important, because they are there to help our students acquire all of these basic skills. That we get meaning from print, all right? That in like oral language, print language has meaning. Kung if oral language is used for exchange of meaning, sa print, ganun din po yun. That's why it's called concepts of print. Now, any of this two sides, okay, are not thoroughly taught, or were not thoroughly taught to our students, there is a backdown of reading comprehension. So magkaroon lang ng problema sa decoding ang bata, may problema na siya sa reading comprehension. Magkaroon na siya ng problema sa language comprehension, may problema na siya. Kaya ang pagkakasabi po natin, language teachers must teach both the language and how to decode in that language. Nangyayari, puro lang tayo language, nakalimutan ang towards literacy. Alright? Di pa ako galit ha, sinasabi ko lang po, this is another model. I presented another model last Wednesday. So those who have not watched my session on struggling learners and struggling readers, I presented two different models. The fluency model, and I have the three clusters of patterns of reading difficulties. You may want to review that. I also presented another comprehension model in teaching comprehension of narratives through plot. And then we have, I presented another model, which is teaching comprehending informational text or factual text through top 3 levels of information and so on and so forth. So I will not discuss in detail those, because I already have I already had a separate topic on that. So I will just focus on language comprehension and decoding for this afternoon. All right, if that's clear now, let's now answer the third question. What causes reading comprehension difficulties? So I'm urging teachers out there, remember that during my session on teaching reading comprehension across subject area, it requires certain level of literacy for our students. And since in distance education, we will be requiring our students to do a lot of reading, we need to identify if these situations or this possible are present in the situation of our students at home. So I'm suggesting we have topics next week on checklists for us to know if our students and teachers are ready for the opening and classes. So I hope I will be one of those speakers who would present those. I think I am one of those speakers. Kasama sa checklist dapat ito ha. So let's now have cause number 1. So it says, struggling readers may come from underprivileged literacy environments. Hindi po underprivileged socio-economic status ang pinag-usapan natin dito. Ito po yung underprivileged literacy environments. Ito yung bahay na ang mga magulang walang oras na kausapin ang mga anak. O ang mga adults na present sa bahay, ang lolo't lola, uncle, kung sino man ang nandun sa bahay, ay walang oras na tulungan ang anak o mga bata na sa pag-drawing, sa paggawa ng assignments, In fact, ang pinaka-basic po doon ay pakipag-usap. Kasi as I explained a while ago, language comprehension. The language comprehension experiences, especially on the beefing up of the background knowledge, is on the child's experience with interaction and socialization. And by this, our students get to have a certain level of proficiency in oral language. So sa bahay ay hindi masyadong kinakausap ang bata. Tapos walang gadget masyado, walang TV. Kung may TV naman, hindi man angko sa level ng bata. So, struggling readers may come from underprivileged literacy environments leading to fewer oral language and emergent literacy skills and limited prior knowledge. So, dapat titingnan nyo doon. May mga checklist kayo dapat kayo. Kayo po, ang mga sumusunod na mga gamit, ang mga sumusunod ay gamit na meron kami sa bahay. Una, radyo, TV, coloring books, pencil. So you need to identify all of those. Otherwise, hindi nyo makikita na ay kahit ano palang gawa ng magandang materyales ang binibigay ko, wala naman talagang support sa bahay. So susunod doon, ang mga sumusunod ay mga gawain namin sa bahay o mga suportang binibigay ng pamilya sa akin. Una, kinakausap ng magulang ang anak bago matulog, bago kumain, and so magbigay ka ng mga sitwasyon doon. I think Bernhardt, if you could, Google Bernhardt, and then I forgot the other one. They came up with an emergent literacy checklist. I also have a study on that, but I will look for my paper on it. May checklist po na mga literacy practices at home that helps our students be exposed to oral language and have sufficient background on literacy use of the target language. Okay po. Next cause would be struggling readers differ from skilled readers in their use of word knowledge while comprehending the text, as well as monitoring comprehension and fix-up strategies, period. They may fail to understand keywords and the way that sentences relate to one another. Ang problema dito po ay baka hindi po natin ang ating modules po papasok ngayon. Kung mga bata daw natin, ang mga estudyante natin ay they do not know how to monitor their own comprehension. So, pag gumawa daw tayo ng materials para sa mga bata at home, it must be organized in such a way that they will focus more on the most important information. Hindi kagaya ng mga textbooks natin dati na nandun lahat ang impormasyon, tas bahala niya kunin ang mga impormasyon. Hindi pwede. Dapat meron na siyang nakasummarize na para sa kanila para meron na silang time sa pag-comprehend. Hindi yung time para sa pagkuha ng impormasyon. So, I already had a session on memory skills development by graphical presentations. You may want again to review my presentation on that. That webinar, my topic on that webinar would help you come up with a material that utilizes graphical presentations that would help our students focus more on monitoring their comprehension and fix their misunderstanding or misperceptions of the lesson, because the materials have been modified in such a way that it facilitates understanding of the material, like numbering the paragraphs, highlighting the most important words in the paragraph, and so on and so forth. All right, use of colors and so on and so forth. All right, so that would be number 2. Third cause, the possible cause of reading difficulty would be, or comprehension difficulty problems would be, comprehension problems may also be due to difficulties in reading fluently. Readers lacking fluency spend excessive time decoding, leading to less short-term memory available for comprehension. This is exactly what's my topic this Wednesday, just this Wednesday, on struggling readers. You may want to review my session on that if our students have problem with fluency, how do we help them with that? So if our students have problem with, say, oral fluency, before reading fluency, these are the activities we can do, like read aloud, we have readers theater, we have refrain, and so on and so forth, antiphonal. All of those have been, I discussed during my session just this Wednesday. You may want to review that. That answers your question number 3, how to handle it. All right, so hindi lang pala sitwasyon sa bahay, baka may problema sa fluency ang bata na ang nangyari po ay dahil hindi pa siya fluent, nakapokus siya sa decoding. So kung ang daming babasahin ng bata at hindi nyo na-identify na non-fluent reader pala siya, ay frustrating yan. Both students, that becomes a situation that is both frustrating to students and to teachers. All right. Then we have a fourth type of causes of reading comprehension breakdown would be some students need more time to be able to decode well a text in order to comprehend it. Kayo po ba ay nag-identify kung itong text na to ay kayang intindihin ng bata na certain given? Minsan kasi naisip natin ay yung oras na kaya natin. Maaari po kasing mas matagal po ito sa ibang mga estudyante. One, we need to consider interest. Ito ba ay within the interest? Ang bata daw na walang interest sa isang topic ng isang babasahin, kagaya ko noon ay hindi ko masyadong gusto ang math, ang tagal ko siyang basahin. It will take me more time to study it. The problem is because even if I need more time to it, dahil hindi ko nga siya naintindihan, I will not give time to it. So how do we do it? So we need to make sure that we try to simplify the way we present it. Babalik po tayo sa explanation po sa number 2 na cause. The way we present the material should be it's already organized simply in such a way that it facilitates comprehension. Kagaya sa math po, sa ordinary textbooks po, nakalagay agad doon ang steps ng how to explanation na verbatim, prose po ang pakakalagay. Baka gawin po natin graphical presentation. So again, we can address this cause of comprehension difficulty among our students. Go back to my webinar on facilitating memory skills via graphical presentation. I have a lot of examples there using graphical presentations. All right, and then we have the fifth and last, of course, common cause of reading comprehension difficulty would be other issues that struggling readers need to overcome include low quality literature. Wala na po tayo siguro mga gawa dyan kung ang ating materials po sa pag-produce ng ating materials po ay brown paper. I don't know how you call that, but there's a brown paper. And then it also lends, it's not so high, prevalent and determining a number of a huge factor. I mean, a huge factor that would determine struggles from our students on reading, but it also contributes too. So low quality literature, hindi maganda ang pagkakasulat ng mga kwento, boring reading materials, walang masyadong pictures that accommodate. Naalala ko tuloy, sorry, on that note pala dito. Bakit nung ang batches po namin, I don't want to mention what year was that. Sige po, mga late 70s and early 80s po, mga nag-aaral po kami yan. I think konti lang ang non-readers not non-readers, mga struggling readers noon kasi nga kasagsagan po yun ng comics noon, ng liwayway, na ang mga binabasa po namin, madali mag-facilitate ng comprehension dahil may mga pictures, tapos sa mga pictures merong may mga bubble. Tapos nalalaman namin kung ito ay iniisip ng character dahil merong ganon. So, in fact, nung unang panahon para na yun, ng panahon namin, tinuturuan na kami directly ng viewing skills. Kasi nalalaman namin ang mga codes and the way it was laid out, kung ito ay description, di ba? Kung description nasa box, naalala niyo sa comics, nasa box. Tapos kung ito ay naaalala lang, nasa utak lang iniisip ng character, nasa parang cloud, di ba? Basta ganun. Tapos pag ito ay sinabi, nasa conversation bubble siya, di ba? Na talagang buo siya and so forth. So it was easy for us to transition from comics to a continuous text because we were kasi mura lang ang comics nun nirerentahan pa lang yan so pwedeng rentahan. I think that we started with 50 peso 50 cents na napunta sa 50 centavos, hindi cents, 50 centavos naging piso hanggang sa naging 5 piso, tapos biglang nawala ang comics. Di ko alam kung bakit, pero if we could bring back that type of layout of delivering certain information to our students right now in the pandemic, it would definitely address boring reading materials. Baka mas magustuhan ng bata. Kaya mga bata ngayon ay bumabalik sa yung sabi lang, manga. Uy, panahon namin meron na yan. Hindi sa inyo lang ngayon. Panahon namin ang tawag niyan ay comics. Liwayway. Yung mga binapanood yun ng mga movies ngayon. Yung, ano ba yun? Yung Agwa. Basta merong mga ganun-ganun. Yung Suma. Gusto yung Suma na yun. Anyway, that's trip to memory lane. And inferior classroom instruction. So I would say not just inferior. Ngayon po hindi inferior classroom instruction, but inferior learning environment at home. Balik po kayo sa sinabi ko sa topic ko po na home scheduling and then conditions at home, baka po wala po masyadong space for our students to think that this is the place and this is the time for them to actually read and learn from a particular subject area. All right, so these are some of the 5 common causes identified where our students may have maybe the cause of their comprehension difficulties. All right, so with that being answered, let's now move on to the 4th question, which is how do we correct and remediate reading comprehension deficit? Time check is 2:55, so I think I'm just okay with my time, so thank God. So we're now on the last question. We just got a lot of information here. How do we correct and remediate reading comprehension deficits? Using that framework, the framework of the cognitive framework of how to learn to read. So we'll focus first on if our students' problem on reading comprehension is on language comprehension, then we're going to come up with specific activities on language comprehension. Ang ibig sabihin po kanina, ang bata po ay, di ba, language comprehension at decoding. So, kunwari ang problem, identify natin na ang problema ng bata ay yung language. Hindi pala, may decoding skill siya, nakadecode siya sa mother tongue at saka Filipino. Naturuan siya ng decoding doon. Hindi lang niya matransfer sa English language. So, anong tuturuan natin? English language, turuan mo natin sila ng comprehension ng language ng English. Right? So, just to remind us again of what we discussed in the framework, the cognitive framework of how to learn to read, language comprehension is defined as or described as the ability to construct meaning of spoken language or language comprehension. Language comprehension requires a complex mix of different abilities, each somewhat dependent on the other. And we're talking about here background knowledge and we have linguistic knowledge. So, pag binigyan daw natin ng opportunity ang bata ng to be able to an experience to use the language, it helps our students acquire language comprehension. Kaya maganda ang mga activities na simulations, dramatizations, role playing, or better yet, listening to drum. Sorry ulit ha. Alam mo, magaling po akong makaintindi sa Filipino, pero hindi ako matatas magsalita talaga sa Filipino. It's because nung panahon namin, yung sa gabi, meron po kami napakinggan na sa DZMM, yung mga radyo drama, yung Gabi ng Laging, si Matar. So naintindihan ko siya sa Filipino, but that's my background knowledge of the language Filipino. So I can read in Filipino, but may problema ako sa speaking because we didn't have an opportunity to speak in Filipino in Leyte kasi hindi naman yun ang ginagamit namin. Would use English or our mother tongue instead. So Filipino was, seldomly used in the community. So if you don't have ample, that's what on language comprehension is telling us. If you don't have ample opportunity for our students to use language, the language orally, magkakaroon din po talaga. It would somehow cause difficulty for students to read in that language. So ano dapat ang gawin natin? Sir, distance education nga kami. Wala na nga siyang conversation sa teacher masyado. Wala pa siyang conversation sa language niyan sa kanyang mga classmates. What do we do? Ito po yung sinasabi ko ever since pa. Maririnig na po kayo sa akin. Padalhan nyo nga niya ng audio. Okay? An audio that, beefs up what they're reading or an online material na mayroong graphically presentation na would facilitate the oral language or they can talk about it. Also, you can also involve the parents in ma'am, sana po kinakausap niyo sa Filipino o sa English ang inyong mga anak para po meron pong ample opportunity for the child to comprehend the language because it's being used at home. Hindi lang po yung mother tongue ninyo sa bahay, hindi also Filipino and nanay. So pagkaroon po ng support so that meron silang background knowledge on that. So since magkakaroon sila ng background knowledge, it will also help students support linguistic knowledge. Magkakaroon sila ng knowledge of the sound system, knowledge how the words are stringed together orally, and so on and so forth. So madali na siyang i-transfer sa print or written language. Now, once students are learning a lot of linguistic knowledge, there's an opportunity for them to ask questions like, Nay, anong ibig sabihin ng, may mga ganyan mga bata pag nakarinig sila ng bagong word, they would ask them, Nay, anong ibig sabihin nun? Tapos, pag nagkamali sila ng gamit, the adults would correct them. Now, the point is, involved po ang mga adults sa bahay. May tanong po sa akin si Sir John noon, nang challenge niya sa akin distance education. Sir, paano kung walang-wala talaga sa bahay? Wala nga silang gadgets, walang TV, walang radyo, wala nga kuryente, sir, walang kuryente. Tapos ang mga magulang, wala rin kasi nagtatrabaho, magsasaka, mangingisda. Tapos pang mag-aaral po siya, mag-isa lang sa bahay, siya lang po. Sabi ko, ano naman ang mga kapatid na mas matanda? Sir, nag-aaral din kasi distance nga sila lahat. Oo nga naman, paano gagawin natin nun? Wala pa akong sagot po, pero ang sinasabi ko lang po dito ay kunwari umuwi na ang mga magulang sa mga bahay, maaaring hindi po are doing their learning as scheduled by Department of Education or the private school at home. Siguro pag uwi ng mga magulang, siguro naghuhugas sila ng pinggan o kaya kumakain sila, mag-usap-usap sila gamit ang wika na yun. Sabi ulit ni Sir Jan, sir, hindi nga marunong mag-English ang mga magulang, paano gagawin natin? Ayan naman tayo O di ang sinasabi ang tawag natin doon ngayon ay intergenerational literacy program. So ibig sabihin, how can we help our students become literate in the language if our parents in the community are also not literate in that language? So ang tawag po natin ngayon dyan ay dapat ang gobyerno ay gumagawa ng intergenerational literacy program. Ginawa po namin yan sa PNU. I proposed a program for intergenerational literacy program sa Baseco. And it was fruitful because the parents were there kasi ginawa lang naming home ang style, and then the LGUs were helping us. If we can do that. So, isa yan sa pwede natin gawin. Kaya lang, ang isa sa mga nakita naming problema ay we need to come up with 30 minutes lang po yun. Once a week lang namin ginagawin sa mga magulang nakasama ang kanilang mga anak. So, they are learning with the kids. Kaya lang po, may face-to-face interaction. Mahirap po kasi turuan ng mga magulang. Hindi pa nga sila marunong magbasa sa language na yon. Tapos sa mga bata, ganun din po, tapos walang face-to-face interaction. That's definitely a struggle. May ginawa po yun sa amin noon ng panahon nila Marcos. Sorry, I'm not endorsing Marcos daw. Pero he was the president then. Ginawa po ni Marcos, nagkaroon po ng matagal na brownout sa amin. Ang ginawa po nila ng mga local government ay meron every Saturday night na pasine. May pasine sila mayor noon. So nanonood kami. Tapos it started, pati mga magulang nanonood noon. So it facilitated conversations among students and parents. And when we got home, nag-uusap-usap kami. Tapos we explore certain words in Filipino na anong ibig sabihin kaya niya, no? Nang sinabi niya, agoy, agoy, aroy, aroy, aroy. So it started the conversation. Now, I think the point here is that on language comprehension, especially in the distance education right now, and in situations where kids will be with families and parents whose literacy level on that language, like Filipino and English, ay wala rin din po. We need the help of the government at the local government to support that. And I hope that the division offices and the regional office have thought of this. Kasi kung ang teacher lang po ang problema niyan, hindi niya po kaya yan. It takes a lot of effort and synergy from and collaboration and involvement from all stakeholders concerned, because that would be outside the capacity of the teacher and outside not just the capacity of the teacher, outside her budget. At kung siya lang ang mag-isip ng ganyan, naku, sabi ko sa inyo, susuko ang ating mga teacher. Dahil on language comprehension, it is kaya nga background knowledge nasa community, nasa bahay. Linguistic knowledge dahil sa experience and background knowledge, they go hand in hand. Anong ituturo ng teacher ng mga sounds? Hindi, wala kulang ng experience sa mga bata sa paggamit ng wika na yun. I will stop there. I think you got my point. Let's proceed. So some of the examples that we can do for background knowledge is simulation strips and vicarious experience like watching television, or perhaps via audio, yung mga radyo na yan, sinasabi sa atin ng Department of Education that the local governments will now support us in coming up with this. Sana magkaroon po talaga ng local radio programs on drama or literacy programs in Filipino and in English, not just and to support the learning of language comprehension on those three languages, mother tongue, Filipino, and English. If not, the teachers will be at a loss how to overcome students' reading comprehension deficit caused by non-language comprehension. Okay, it's because they do not understand the language. Also would be watching television, as I've said, would be that if they cannot go out, it cannot go out because, because of MECQ, of the quarantine and lockdown. What we can do is to make our students safe at home would be a local and national television channel come up with educational that supports the learning of our students. But ang hirap na naman yun. Paano kung lahat ng grade levels, lahat ng subjects, paano nila gagawin yun? I suggest that mga pre-recorded po sana. Sir, wala nga pong television sa bahay ang mga bata. Wala nga po silang wala po silang mga gadgets. Paano gagawin namin? Local government po. I think the local government should help the Department of Education identify these families that do not have and come up with creative ways how they can collectively put them in one place that is they're all safe and support the Department of Education or your private schools. Mga private schools siguro mayayaman ng mga pamilya, mga kliyente niyan. So huwag na natin muna silang isipin. Just kidding. Pero madali nilang isipan yan. But for the public school kasi very varied, profound pa nga. Hindi lang varied but profound ang mga sitwasyon ng bawat estudyante. Hindi nga lang sa sitwasyon pa ng pagiging poor ng mga estudyante natin, mayroon pang mas poor. Sa mga mas poor, may poor pa. Sa poor pa, may poorest of the poor pa talaga. I have seen that and it breaks my heart that a lot of politicians do not see this. And what hurts me so much that the teachers who are always faced with this situation every day are at a loss kung paano gagawin nila. They do their most to be able to address these needs. Pero syempre, hindi naman sila ganun kagalingan, kulang ng budget, ang tao lang din naman sila. They cannot provide for everything. So, yun po masasabi ko, involvement of all stakeholders, especially the local government. Next would be linguistic knowledge, constant and consistent use of the language in oral situation engagements, and ample oral language modeling at home on the use of phonology, the sound system. Kaya nga po na-propagate po na sa Bisaya, sorry, I have nothing against Bisaya Paggoy, yung ang kagaya ng pera, naging pira, because mga allophones po yan sa kanila. I'd love to talk about allophones, pero nga, para sa kanila, sa pandinig, walang pinag-iba ang pera sa pira. Alright? So dahil yun lang naririnig ng mga batang lumalaki ang pera ay pira, so that's because they're exposed to that language, that model na yun din ang kanilang oral proficiency or oral production of the language. So I could say the mispronunciation of our students of certain words linguistically are because of the mispronunciation modeling of adults in their community, if not at home. Right? So what we want is an ample opportunity for them at home to be exposed to this language. Okay? Yung kaya niyan. Pwede naman po kasing pwede naman kung talagang may cellphone sila sa bahay, naglalaro sila, they may want to talk about that. Halimbawa, who are you texting right now? What are you talking about? Oh, do you miss your classmates? So what did you say? Kung sa English. O kung English naman, sinong chinachat mo naman dyan? Bakit? Ano ba sa Tagalog namimiss? Namimiss na lang din namimiss mo na ba sila? Anong sabi nila? Yeah, anything that could start a conversation, starting what they do, it could be the television. Sabi ko nga, kahit po yung nagaan lang sila, kumakain, sabi mo, could you please pass the rice? Could you please pour me water? Yung mga ganyan, mga functional statements po. All right. Next would be on cipher knowledge. Now, what are the causes of if our students problem with comprehension, reading comprehension would be on decoding, specifically on cipher knowledge. Let's now find out how we can help our students on that. So let's just recall how we define cipher knowledge during the time I discussed about the cognitive framework of learning to read. Cipher knowledge is the systematic relationships between written and spoken words are those that consistently relate to the units of the written word and the units of the spoken word. So ibig sabihin, if our students they're able to relate their oral language proficiency to the written word and vice versa. There's no interaction na, oo, naalala ko yun kasi yun ang sinasabi ko. It's easy for students to decode words because these words are the words that they use orally. So, dapat alam daw ni teacher na ito yung oral vocabulary ng bata, hindi sana gagamitin natin sa written or sa reading, sa pagtuturo ng reading. If a child learns the systematic relationships, she can recognize words she has never before encountered in print, but whose meaning she already knows from the course of language acquisition. So, ito yung sinasabi natin na one way or the other, natututo ng bata to understand unfamiliar words via context. This is a typical situation for the child learning to read. Kaya dito tinuturo natin yung mga synonyms, antonyms, structural analysis, and so on and so forth. So how do we do that? I would suggest phonological awareness continuum, all right? That we teach our students activities on listening. So it will start with listening. Turuan muna ng bata mga listening. So listening. Yan. Tapos then syllable awareness. What are the words that have those syllables? Halimbawa, mango, okay, mangga kung sa Filipino. Instead of, just saying mangga, let them, physically respond to it. Mangga. Magkaiba po ang mangga. Dapat kung ano ang clapping, kung ano po kakabigas, ganun din daw dapat ang clapping. Mangga. Mango. Hindi. Mango. So, mali na po ang pronunciation because nagsyllable ka nga counting pero you did not follow the proper accentuation and the speed. So masisira po din ang magkiba kasi ang mangga sa mangga, sa buhay sa buhay, di ba? So dapat alam po natin yung not just syllable awareness but the syllable awareness within the context of meaning. Pupunta po tayo sa rhyme awareness, sorting initial and final sounds, then onset and rhyme segmentation, then alphabet knowledge. There are specific activities for that though. I'd love to talk about those, but again, meron na po tayong training nagkaroon na po tayo ng webinar on teaching beginning reading, and I don't wanna replicate that. But if you want kung meron po kayong mga specific request, dapat isa-isa. Dapat meron po tayong phonological awareness teaching through listening. Isa-isayin natin yan. Isang topic ang listening, isang topic ang syllable awareness, isang topic ng rhyme awareness, isang topic ng sorting initial finals, and so on and so forth. What I'm trying to say here is that if our students have problems with cipher knowledge, our students have problems with all of this, or groups of this phonological awareness sub-skills. You have listening, syllable awareness, rhyme awareness, sorting initial and final sounds, onset, rhyme segmentation, alphabet knowledge. Right? Okay. Now, if our students have problems with decoding, there's a high possibility that our students also have problems with their vocabulary. Okay, and since they have problems with their vocabulary, it would also facilitate hindrance on reading comprehension, on their reading comprehension. So, as we defined lexical knowledge a while ago, is that vocabulary can be defined as all the words known and used by a particular person. Ibig sabihin, ito ang kanyang mga sets of vocabulary. But it could be of two types, productive or achieve, and receptive or receive. Ibig sabihin, the vocabulary or the words that students know or individuals know can be categorized into two. You have the receptive vocabulary and the expressive vocabulary. Not all of your receptive vocabulary are transferred to an active state for expression or expressive vocabulary. So there are words that you understand when you listen or when you read, but they are not part of your vocabulary. Sometimes you know the meaning of tantamount to, but during your speaking and in your presentations, you do not use the word tantamount to. You say, it's just likened to. Pero alam niyo na halos parehas lang naman yun. Okay? But every often it has been observed that there is no flawless division maybe to productive knowledge, also known as achieve, and receptive knowledge, also known as receive. It has been observed that a person's receptive vocabulary is larger than productive vocabulary. Mas marami po ang nasa receptive. Mas maraming vocabulary ang tao na naiintindihan niya sa pakikinig, sa pagbasa, at sa panonood. So this is my framework. Let me present to you now my framework that I conceptualized during my special paper on reading way back in 2005, which I've been using when I facilitate modules development, especially at the Sisters of Mary. We have vocabulary development enhancement framework. That's yours truly. And then we have categories. We have two categories of two groups of vocabulary. We have receptive vocabulary, that the words that we have in our heads that we acquired through listening, through reading, and through viewing are part of our what we call as our mental vocabulary. And from this mental vocabulary, as often as we engage in oral conversations, oral activities using the language, some of this receptive vocabulary become part of our expressive vocabulary that we use orally and words that we use in written. That's why a lot of my colleagues tell me that I use highfalutin words for my explanation. I said, that's not highfalutin as far as I am concerned. That is part of my ordinary oral language or oral vocabulary. That means it is not part of your receptive vocabulary. Hence, it is highfalutin to you, but not to me. So wag mong sabing highfalutin ka. Ang isipin mo, those words are highfalutin to me. Nakuha po natin. So on that note, there's a huge possibility that the receptive vocabulary of the teacher or educator and their expressive vocabulary would somehow match. And when they write materials or develop materials, their expressive vocabulary is so high for the students. Yun po yung experience na nangyayari sa akin when I explain things to some of my colleagues. So as a material developer for reading material, we need to be mindful that probably the vocabulary we're using is within our level, but it may not be the level of our students. So it would also facilitate a breakdown of comprehension among our students. All right. So we go back again to readability tests, or if not, lexile testing. All right. I'm not going to mention kung saan kayo makakuha ng mga test na yun kasi Vibal and I probably later on will develop a lot of lexical leveled materials later on for reading to help our students. But at the moment, we're focused on webinars, but that would be a total different project later on perhaps. So that's expressive vocabulary. So as often as we use words and we practice words every day, and in our converse, that's why oral language or language comprehension is through ample opportunity for us to talk about it. So nadadagdagan palalo ang ating receptive vocabulary. All right. So the different types of our receptive vocabulary would be listening vocabulary. I just took icon radio for us to connote that it's listening. So as we are exposed to a lot of people using the language, be it Filipino, mother tongue, or English, nagkakaroon po tayo ng listening vocabulary. All right. And since that listening vocabulary is already part of our brain, and when we are taught how to read, we are now able to somehow transfer our listening vocabulary to reading if decoding has been taught well. Okay? Kung tinuro ng decoding daw, na madali na transfer ng bata ang kanyang konsepto ng vokabularyo o mga talasalitaan sa listening, sa reading. Ito po, sabi niya, bahay. Nasasabi niya bahay. Ang bahay po namin nandun sa dulo. Then pagbasa niya, sabi niya, bahay. Bahay. Kasi nga, part ng kanyang oral vocabulary. Nagkakaroon doon ng breakdown because some of the vocabulary that we use in reading are not yet part of the listening vocabulary of our students. Nasa receptive pa lang po tayo Baka magkaroon within the receptive vocabulary, nagkakaroon ng background, nagkakaroon ng breakdown. So tayo mga teachers daw po, ang mga teachers na po, dapat magkakaroon po ng listahan ng mga salita na tinuturo sa mga bata. Tapos padagdag every grade level hanggang sa alam na natin na ano na ang bulk ng vocabulary ng mga bata. Kaya lang po mga estudyante, mga teachers po natin, they don't have enough time to monitor the vocabulary development of our students. Unlike nung panahon namin, sabi ko lang mga panahon namin, ang aming mga libro kasi noon merong glossary at the end. Alala niyo yung mga ganun na sabi ng teacher, yung mga naka-bold na mga letters dyan sa inyong mga libro, huwag nyo kong tatanong, kami ng mga English teachers namin nun. Huwag nyo kaming tatanungin kung ang mga words na yun, anong ibig sabihin ng words na yan. May glossary ang bawat libro ninyo. Kung ma-encounter nyo yung word na yan doon at hindi nyo maintindihan sa sentence na yan, tingnan nyo sa glossary. Ganun kadali po ng panahon namin. At there are some books right now na instead of having an end glossary, they define those words within, there are marginal notes in the pages where those are the writer's perspective of words that, they think students may struggle with. But there are still other words that students may struggle on. Diba? Hindi natin alam pa. So, we try as much possible so that they can easily read them when they are taught decoding. And vice versa. The other words that they have not heard before, and when they read it, it becomes part of their listening vocabulary too. All right? And then the listening vocabulary and the reading vocabulary adds on to the viewing vocabulary of our students, and eventually also adds on to the reading vocabulary and to the listening vocabulary. So within the receptive vocabulary, listening vocabulary, reading vocabulary, viewing vocabulary, these are all sources of our receptive vocabulary. Ang dami-dami po talaga. So ibig sabihin, the more our students are exposed to oral language, oral and written language, and environmental print, so the more we enrich their receptive vocabulary, and the more the receptive vocabulary is enriched, it is better for us to help them to be expressive. What are those? So it's easy for them to talk about because they have the vocabulary to represent their ideas. A lot of our students are shy, not because shy of explaining their thoughts, not necessarily because they are not confident of what they can do or their oral language. It's because for lack of words. It's not because they do not understand what you said or what they have read. It's just that they lack the necessary vocabulary or speaking vocabulary. Hindi sila sanay na sabihin ng words na yun. Kaya they feel shy speaking up or, engaging in oral conversations. Next, if we could connect what they have listened to writing, then nakukonect natin ang receptive to vocabulary. And vice versa, listening to representing vocabulary, paggawa ng mga pamphlets, paggawa ng mga posters, and so on and so forth. Natutuwa tuloy ako ngayon, naalala ko nung sa Divine Word University. I was not really active academically, but I was just, okay. I realized that those activities before that there were, poster making and pamphlet making, then I was actually facilitating one way or the other. Probably our teachers were not really that explicitly concerned on the transfer of our receptive vocabulary to our speaking and writing and representing, but they did facilitate that. And if we can do that again to our students via distance education, that we have an online material via listening, and what we can ask them is to talk about it. Now, kung anong talking about it, siguro mag-create po tayo ng forum for our students online. If not online, kausapin nga natin sa mga magulang, dapat kausapin nila mga anak nila. And then writing activity, and then representing activity via, say, the creative use of the language via pamphlets, via videos, via other visual representations, and so on and so forth. We can also do that, reading, representing, speaking, anong binasa nila, pag-usapan nila, anong binasa nila, isulat nila, anong binasa nila, gawa sa ng representasyon through storyboards and so on and so forth. Or kung ano napanood nila, pag-usapan nila, kung ano ang kanilang napanood, write something about it, or represent it so that ang mga bata po natin ay hindi listeners lang, hindi lang receptive. Marami po tayong mga estudyante na ang tatalino, pero dahil hindi nga nabigyan ng opportunity to talk, to write and represent, they remain just receptive. Matalino po sila, but they are just not expressive. And we don't want our students to remain as such. Otherwise, magkakaroon nga sila ng comprehension problem. So if we have an interplay, we come up with a balance of helping our students beef up the receptive vocabulary and do expressive vocabulary through ample opportunity with listening materials, reading materials, and view materials. Then when we allow our students to talk about it, write about it, and represent it creatively, then we have facilitated one way or the other language comprehension and decoding at the same time. Okay? I will not, hindi ko na po ito elaborate. Please just go back to the webinar within the week. This week, I don't know what day was that, on correcting and remediating vocabulary deficits. Okay, just go on. Okay. And then on reading comprehension na po tayo. So, last na po ito dito. So, paano kung ang students already have enough language comprehension skills and decoding skills, and yet mabagal pa rin sila mag-comprehend, okay, for their grade level. So let's understand what reading comprehension is all about. Reading comprehension is a skill with a knowledge with a knowledge base just like all of the elements that support it, and as such, it can can and should be taught explicitly. The teacher can help the students develop an appreciation for different types of reading comprehension like literal comprehension, inferential comprehension, and evaluative comprehension, and the different types of text, expository, narrative, formal, informal, and can introduce a child to differences in literary genre. So in short, lahat ng definition na to ay na-explain ko po sa teaching comprehension, comprehension of narrative text, teaching comprehension of expository text, teaching comprehension across subject areas. Marami pong nag-comment kasi sa akin doon, privately po, sinasabi na, Sir, yung explanation nyo po doon kasi mali, kasi nga hindi pa nga sila readers. No, when I talked about comprehending narrative text, information text, and across subject areas, I already assume my baseline was that they have language comprehension and they are decoders. Ngayon kung hindi sila decoders, that would fall nga itong sinasabi ko ngayon na dapat turuan muna sila ng decoding skills. Or go back to struggling students, let them be fluent first. Okay? So here are just, recall of what we discussed, of things that we need to teach our students. We need to allow our students specific strategy that the sets of skills of comprehending narrative text are not necessarily the same strategies when they comprehend informational or factual text. Because in narrative text, what they identify would be the problem, the conflict, the theme, the characters, the setting, the reaction, and the consequences, and the resolution, or basically the plot. And then for the characters, they need to identify who's the protagonist and the antagonist, and then you have the setting, the time, and the place. So magkaibang elemento. So kung magkaibang elemento po ng narrative sa factual, then it demands a different cognitive skills and reading skills for that matter to attack this type of text. Balik po tayo sa text types na pinag-usapan natin last week at saka just this Wednesday. Recall ko lang po. So I will not discuss this in detail. Please, those are just watching right now, please review my session on teaching comprehension of narrative text. Ito po, nandun po ang sagot dito kung paano natin turuan ng comprehension skills for narrative text. All right. Now, for understanding factual text, I discussed about top 3 levels of information. We need to help our students to skim and scan for topic, for the main idea, and for the supporting details. Now, I discussed the strategies and specific skills, how to do this during my session on teaching comprehension of factual texts and teaching comprehension across subject areas. We want to go back to that because I presented lots of strategies and presented a model how to help students have overcome and acquire comprehension skills of factual texts. Additional to that, we need to teach our students skimming and scanning for information. Nag-demonstrate po ako niyan doon sa sessions ko, making inferences, predicting outcomes, making generalizations, making summaries, nagbigay pa rin ako mga samples na mga ganyan, making outlines through graphic presentations, making connections to their experiences, to their background knowledge, and then monitoring comprehension through the use of questions. Ang tawag ko po doon ay the 3-level guide questions. So you go back to my topic on teaching comprehension across subject areas using the ERICA model or effective reading in the content areas. Okay, with that, I'm now ready to entertain questions from you guys. It's 3:28. Yeah, Jillian, do I have questions?
Thank you very much, Brother Roderick. Now we
Yes.
will proceed to the question and answer portion. So our first question is from Anthony Dean. Students will be using capslets prepared by their teachers in school at home scheme. How can teachers correct?
Sorry, Jillian.
Hello?
Hello, Jillian. I did not hear the first statement.
Okay, hold on po, brother. Ayan, clear na po? Okay, so the first question is from Anthony Dean. Students will be using capslets prepared by their teachers in school at home scheme. How can teachers correct their understanding of something and develop their comprehension skills?
All right. As I've mentioned again, first muna, how do we facilitate the comprehension of the materials that you provide them with at home? So dapat naka-structure na po ang inyong materials na talagang pang-comprehension. Hindi kagaya ng dati na pag-present po natin information yan sa klase, buo lang siya. Dapat naka-facilitate, like, chinang po natin na chunk into parts lang muna. Halimbawa, ang suggestion ko nga is question answer formats. So kung ang question format po natin, nakachunk po siya to answer certain questions, and the questions are based on the learning competencies that they're supposed to acquire and be able to absorb during the duration of the understanding of the module. Now, on checking of the comprehension po, I really highly suggest on creating comprehension assessment. Alas, that's not part of my topic yet, but I think after next week, we will have topics on assessments na po. So, importante po na tama rin po, may assessment po tayo. Now, there are many what we call as formal assessment, and there's what we call as creative assessment of comprehension. Now, since they're at home, they will be bored with just formal assessment tools. We can come up with creative assessment tools later on using graphic organizers, graphic presentations, pictures, and videos that would facilitate assessment and monitoring of their comprehension without necessarily making them feel that they are being tested. So that's my answer to you, sir. Hello.
Thank you for that.
For the development for the structure of the materials po, nag-suggest po ako ng ERICA model, effective reading in the content areas, how we can present our materials in such a way that it facilitates comprehension. Hindi po siya kapareho ng presentasyon po natin ng mga bata nasa school or ng mga regular textbooks na dire-diretso ang impormasyon. Sa model na present ko po nung teaching comprehension across subject area, nagbigay pa ako na ano ba ang unang ipapresent sa lesson, ano yung susunod, tapos paano gagawin yun para maintindihan ng bata, anong gagawin afterward. So you may want to go back to the effective reading in the model that I presented last week. That was Friday last week on teaching reading across content areas. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, brother. Our next question is from Marvin San Juan. What reading intervention should we give to learners who read well yet lack comprehension?
Paano read well tapos lack comprehension? Are you telling me that the language, was it on language comprehension or may problema sa decoding? Kasi hindi pwede, we need to identify specifically. So sabi mo po ay they can read well pero comprehension. Ibig sabihin decoders po sila kasi nga pag nagbasa sila orally, ang ganda pakinggan. Pero pag tinanong mo sila walang comprehension, baka yun ang gusto niyo sabihin. So ang tawag po natin doon ay, ang estudyante po natin ay decoders. They are fluent readers but somehow they lack the comprehension skills that would, be able to connect to the text. Ibig sabihin, baka kulang sila ng, kung ang pinag-usapan ko halimbawa, ang binabasa po nila ay nasa mathematics, pero ang mathematics kulang ng real life situation. So, mahirap, they can decode pero hindi sila makarelate sa sinasabi doon. So that's why a lot of students struggle so much in math and science because some of the examples are not relatable. Okay, kaya nga importante, meron po sanang facility po na sana kung magbibigay tayo ng example, meron po siyang concrete example that students may be able to relate to. Halimbawa, kung lesson po natin sa mathematics ay on discounts, baka gusto natin sabihin ng discounts sa pagbili ng mga toys sa department store na merong 15% discount. Yung mga ganun ba na, hindi sabihin na a book, basta mga samples pa na very highly abstract na hindi makarelate ang bata. Maring they are able to decode, but because the language comprehension is compromised. Remember, the elements of language comprehension is background knowledge, and linguistic knowledge. Baka naiintindihan nilang language pero kulang sila ng experience. So the theme or the topic of your example or what they are reading is not, they cannot relate to it. Okay? So baka ang gusto natin gawin po dito ngayon ay mag-simulate po na tayo, mga simulations, or better yet, ang sinasabi po natin ng mga, let's provide them with ample motivational activities to prepare their minds. Kaya nga pang motivation po natin na hindi puro lang emotional, dapat cognitive. Ito rin matagal ko na sinasabi sa mga teachers namin sa Sisters of Mary na hindi nag-aangkop ang inyong motivational activities to prepare your students mentally. Alam ko po na mayroong emotion din po at saka meron pong ding physical motivation. Pero if you're asking your students to think about, say, projectile of the spaceship, yung space shuttle, from one point in on Earth going to the moon. Projectile lang ginagawa nila. Okay? Baka gusto mo nang papanoorin mo sila ng about astronauts and how a rocket launches here on Earth para magkaroon sila ng idea. Kasi mahirap umintindi ng isang bagay na nadidecode mo pero wala ka na masyadong experience. Mag-struggle po ang bata. So hindi lang po sa decoding may problema ang bata na magkakaroon. There's a possibility that they do not have yet an idea of what is in the text. A good example would be ang bata na hindi pa nakakasakay ng airplane, sample lang po ng airplane, pag binasa niya ang sentence about riding on an airplane, hindi siya masyado makaka-relate. Siguro madidecode niya, pero hindi siya makaka-relate. So hindi siya magkakaroon ng idea on it. Ang tawag po natin doon ay vague po ang kanyang comprehension. Ang tawag po natin doon ay partial schema on the selection. Meron po tayong sinasabi na full schema. So kung full schema po ang mga bata, madaling po niyang maintindihan. May decoding siya at naintindihan niya agad kasi may background experience sa binabasa. Pero kung bata na mayroong partial, kailangan si teacher magbigay ng dagdag na support para maintindihan ng bata ang theme or context ng binabasa ng bata. Ngayon, kung bata naman ay may sinasabi po natin no schema at all, so anong gagawin natin? Magpo-provide ka muna ng experiences. Kaya sinasabi ko dati is, mas maganda po na ang mga bata po ay mas maraming social experiences, if not first-hand, vicarious po. Para po, mas madali po nilang ma-comprehend, not just decode, but also comprehend the theme and the content and the context of the reading material that they are attacking or studying on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, brother. Our last question is from Miss Lisa Tabuada. Which do you think we can comprehend well? Reading a story or listening to a story?
Depende po ulit sa bata po yun. Ang bata po na has reached a certain proficiency level on both oral and written, both po niya ma-comprehend. Pero ang bata na hindi pa nakaka-decode, hindi pa tinuruan ng decoding skills, phonics, phonemic awareness, alphabet knowledge, blending, phonics instruction through synthetic and analytic, yung mga ganun mga style na yon, I'd love to talk all of those. Kaya lang po meron na po tayong topic on those. But if you want me to talk about teaching decoding po sa mga bata, I would love that. Kasi yun po ang pinaka-basic decoding. Sir, turo mo kung paano magturo ng decoding kasi yun ang problema ng mga bata. Alright. So, ang mga bata na hindi pa nakaka-decode, through listening, through oral talaga, listening muna sila. Kasi kanina in-explain ko po kanina, the basis of language comprehension of a text is proficiency in the oral language. So, ang bata na magaling makinig, okay? So, it always starts with helping students have proficient listening skills on texts. It will start there. Yan po talaga ang baseline ng decoding. It's difficult for students to decode on a language that they have not been exposed to sufficiently in oral language, via listening, via viewing, yun po. So kailangan, kung tatanungin niyo po ako ulit ng, sir, ano pong unahin namin? Eh di unahin niyo po muna ang listening bago reading. Okay? Thank you very much.
That's all the questions we have for now. Any last reminders to our viewers for today, brother?
Definitely, but I just wrote it down so that, there's no more misconceptions, just, you'll know exactly, definitely, my challenge to you. So these will be your takeaways. Hopefully, this will be your takeaways for my session this afternoon. So skills and meaning should never be separated. Even if you teach, sabi ko nga, if you're teaching them language comprehension, if you're teaching them language, syntax, grammar, and so on and so forth, or decoding, please relate that to meaning. You do not isolate skills from meaning. You are teaching on language comprehension and decoding because it will facilitate literacy development or, to be specific, reading comprehension. So instructional techniques that help children understand and use the alphabetic code should be applied hand in hand with those that guide students in reading comprehension and thoughtful response to literature and the effective use of the writing process. Ibig sabihin po, hindi pwedeng na decoding ka lang ang tinuturo mo pero wala kang language comprehension stud. So they go together. If you are teaching them the decoding, dapat i-connecta mo agad sa language comprehension. Okay? Hindi pwedeng decoding lang ako ngayon. Hindi. Konektado po sila. You cannot separate one from the other. That's why isa silang pyramid. Okay? Sabi nga na Cherry's pyramid. Okay? Next we have sorry. That was a bad joke. Next would be, that's gonna die a few seconds from now. Next would be, instruction is systematic. So dapat alam natin ang pagkakasunod-sunod. So I'm highly suggesting the cognitive framework for learning to read. Unahin niyo muna ang concept about print kung sa decoding kayo, and then phonemic awareness. So tingnan niyo po anong pinaka-baseline, paakyat po tayo. So kung ituturo mo to, dapat may comprehension. Palaging baba-angat, baba-angat, baba-angat. So you have a selection for them to comprehend, but you want the left to right, top to bottom, capitalization. So kahit nagpo-focus ka ng details, dapat meron pa rin comprehending a certain text. Pero starting po tayo sa listening, then transitioning it to reading. That's why it's systematic and planned. Deliberate in application. Go back again to my framework on receptive and hindi lang puro receptive. Dapat may expression. So pagkatapos basahin ng bata, give an opportunity for them to talk about, write about it, and then, creatively represent it. This does not mean a rigid progression of one-size-fits-all teaching. Ibig sabihin po na ang progression po, ang pace from one student to another would be the same. Hindi po. May mas mabagal pa po. Kasi nga, explanation kanina ang bata na kahit magaling sa decoding, kung kulang ng schema, kulang ng experiences po, mas mababagal pa rin po siya. So, hindi lang po yung skills sa decoding ang tinitingnan po natin. Maano po yung kanyang experiences sa bahay at saka experiences sa community. Kaya ang bata na halos nasa bahay na hindi pinapalabas ng mga magulang, walang interaction masyado, talagang bahay lang para safe ang bata, medyo kulang po siya ng background knowledge. So, magkakaroon po ng breakdown din sa kanyang comprehension. Next would be, so again, you have to orient the parents too. All right. Next would be intensive instruction on any particular skill or strategy should be based on need. So, ibig sabihin, dapat na-identify muna natin kung anong pangailangan ng bata, saan sila mahina, then we have explicit teaching on those. Next, thus intensity will vary both with individuals and groups. Okay, so again, balik ulit tayo sa needs ng bata. So, very importante, talaga ng English na yan. It's very important for us to do diagnosis. And hopefully after next week, when we continue on reading and literacy series of seminars, next week po magpo-focus lang po tayo sa opening of classes. Pabalik po tayo pupunta po tayo sa diagnosis. Alright? Kasi para ma-continue po natin. Sir, nagpaparemediate na po kayo pero hindi nyo kami tinuruan kung paano mag-diagnose. You have a point. Okay? And finally, my last words would be there is no substitute for ongoing documentation. Sinasabi ko ng assessment and diagnosis po yan, and monitoring of learning to determine the order in which skills should be addressed and the level of intensity required to help a child or group of children succeed in a particular area of identified problem. The use of running records and analysis of invented spelling serve this purpose well. So, kung matutuloy po yung ating session on diagnosis of literacy skills of our students, siguro doon po ako magtuturo ng paano po gawin ng running records, paano po mag-construct ng mga simple reading literacy assessment sa inyong mga classrooms, sa inyong mga bahay para sa paggamit ng mga bata. Then I will try to give you provide you with how we can use MISCU analysis in diagnosing specific problems of our students. With that, thank you very much for obliging me and listening to me. And thank you for those who appreciate the information that I provide them with. I know that we don't have enough time, but you want me to elaborate more on those. But if you want me to single out on the certain topic that I talked this afternoon, you may want to suggest that to our team so that we can, aptly address those. And for those who have just watched and said that I know that already, kudos to you. That means it's an affirmation that you've been doing things appropriately and correctly, but that does not make you better teacher than the other teachers. It just makes you more knowledgeable, but not better teacher. But I'm suggesting, since you know those, you may want to share that to your other teachers, and so that we can work together in helping and addressing the needs of our students. With that, thank you very much, and have a good day, and have happy weekend ahead of you. Thank you.
There we have it. On behalf of Vibal Group Incorporated, I would like to thank our speaker for today for this very